everyone. Indeed, we, as a team, are here to share with you really an adventure, a journey, and a journey that we have very much shared with the Democracy and Culture Foundation, helped by our friends at the Berggruen Foundation, and many other colleagues. And as you will see in a minute, this adventure has a name. It's called the Democratic Odyssey. Indeed, it's an odyssey because it's an odyssey that started many months ago as we are preparing the ships to launch the flotilla of all those who want to be in this adventure, this dream with us together. But the flotilla really took off yesterday in a very, very special moment. And indeed, to convey perhaps the message for today is, I think this morning, we heard the questions, the tension in our conversation about democratic innovation. We heard Ian, we heard Han, we heard the teen hack, who are going to come back in a moment, all speak about democratic citizen engagement, following on Anthony's really presentation of the building blocks. We all believe in citizen engagement, don't we? And then Colombe, reality check, well, people don't care. Really, Colombe? Well, maybe they do, but the conditions have to be right. The message, show, don't tell. The message is, for economics, demand, supply, supply creates demand. In other terms, as Kevin Costner would say, if you build it, they will come. So the spirit of the Democratic Odyssey is to build it. And we started building it, building our Citizens Assembly yesterday. This is a picture from yesterday, and this is our website on the Publiques, which, as you all know, of course, since you're here, was the place where, for 200 years, the Athenians met as the Ecclesia, maybe 5,000, 10,000 people, we're not quite sure, to decide every week on city affairs. They stopped exactly 2,301 years ago. And yesterday was the first time that a Citizens' Assembly proper took place on this very spot. Well, Obama had spoken before, but it wasn't quite a Citizens' Assembly on that spot. So it gives you the goosebumps. It gave us goosebumps. It was kind of intense. And this was a launch moment. So we want to tell you a bit more about what this project is all about. And in order to do that, we have my three colleagues here. Jamie Mackay, who is the project manager of the Democratic Odyssey at the EUI. We have Niccolò Milanese, who heads European Alternatives, one of the very important partner in this adventure. And we have Camille Dobler, who is from Mission Publiques and Participe Action, who many of you know has been one of the major company facilitator of the Conference on the Future of Europe, bringing with it 25 years of experience in the field. And Camille, you can see her right there. What do you do there, Camille? You have a piece of paper on the picture. She was facilitating yesterday at the Publiques. And then we have the members of our team who are kind of around, and I'd like to ask the members of our team to kind of get up for a moment so that you all kind of know them. And indeed, members of our team, you will be spread around the tables in about 10 minutes so that you can hear. We will open up for a little while for short conversations. So you're ready to go. Right. And on these words, we will have Jamie start, perhaps telling us something overall about the project and what the idea of transnational citizen assembly means.
Thank you, Kalypso. Everyone can hear me. I'll do this. So yeah, indeed, let's start off from this idea of one of the things that I think is hopefully present within our name, our chosen name for the project, the Democratic Odyssey. And this is intrinsically linked to our ideas of journeys, to something epic, something with a rather large geography to it. And this is an imaginative dimension of the project that's very important, but it also links quite concretely to something that's, if not unique, then certainly a key aspect that we want to flag in our assembly process that we're developing. I imagine that many people around the room, when they think of citizens' assemblies, are imagining the many examples that we could point to at local, municipal, and occasionally national level. Achilles indeed was alluding earlier to climate assemblies across the EU. We've seen over 70 of these at a local level in the past 5 years alone. Yet there is a kind of burgeoning, slowly developing infrastructure of participatory mechanisms at transnational level, including at EU level. So we can point to things like the Committee of the Regions linked together participatory budgeting mechanisms. We can look to many examples like the European Citizens Initiative, which is bringing people together to give citizens a greater voice in shaping the political agenda at Europe. The greatest example, which indeed Camille knows very well, was the Conference on the Future of Europe, and the embeddedness of particularly of the transnational European citizens panels, which brought together by random selection citizens from the member states to deliberate on 4 panels around particular topics. This is kind of an important part of the genesis of our project, which came out of paying very close attention to what the EU was already doing at an institutional level to give greater space for citizens to deliberate, and a space adjacent to assemblies of the kind that we're interested in. So we looked at the Conference of Europe as a sort of, from the position of critical friends, as a group of academics, civil society, journalists, artists, some friends in the institutions as well, with a vision of embarking outwards on this democratic odyssey to try and look at how this might be developed into the future. In a sense, the Conference on the Future of Europe planted the seeds of something. We can see the potential, and yet it was something that happened in a certain circumvented manner, to some degree because of the coronavirus pandemic, which disrupted the organization, but there are other reasons too. So a key part of the democratic odyssey, the first thing that we should say is, after this wonderful event that we had yesterday on the Publiques, this is the beginning of a 12-month journey that will take us towards our first full transnational assembly, which will take place here in Athens in September of 2024. But one of the key dimensions to this is going to be building a larger public conversation and a collective education process about the mechanisms by which citizens can engage in a manner that is not purely to do with representative democracy. There's a campaigning, arts, media dimension to this that we're trying to grow through allusions to, indeed, the Odyssey, but also in other exciting ways as we go ahead. So this is kind of, I suppose, the unique crux on which our assembly model depends. On the one hand, we're working with civil society, arts, and journalism. We're also working closely with elected representatives, with people from the Commission, to try to build a model that is both top-down and bottom-up at the same time, as we embark on a project that we hope will extend far beyond this first assembly 12 months from now.
Indeed, Jamie, you say 12-month journey, but we called it Odyssey to convey the idea that our democratic adventure, all of us together, will kind of last forever, just like Ulysses was never really home, but that's another story. So on this, thank you, Jamie and Niccolò. Can you say a bit more about the European and transnational character of the Assembly?
Sure, thanks, Kalypso. So as you all know, the next year is a rather crucial one for democracy, not only in Europe but around the world. There's important elections that are taking place in this continent and in others, but in this continent there's an important a moment called the European elections, which, as I don't need to explain to you, involves electing the new European Parliament, getting new European commissioners, and setting a new course for the European Union. And over the past 4 or 5 years, anybody who had any doubt of the relevance of these institutions, the power, the influence, and the global place of the European institutions, has hopefully woken up to how important the way power is wielded by the European institutions is. And so a People's Assembly for Europe is, at least in part, about trying to influence and shape the agenda of the next European Commission and European Union. And we'll be interacting with the elections and with the appointment of the new Commission, which will be just over a year from now. The new Commission will take its office. So this is one sense in which the Assembly is for Europe. One sense in which the Assembly is not European is that, of course, we don't only want to include people who were born in Europe in it. It is an assembly for everybody who is living in, and dare I say, around Europe, because after all, where are the borders? Who's to set where the borders are of Europe? And I don't need to tell people perhaps in this city that aside from Odyssey starting from here, the word Europe itself is a Greek construction, and there's hypotheses about what it might mean. Does it mean wide-eyed? Does it mean the other shore? One thing it certainly refers to is the goddess abducted by Zeus, so a history of violence like our European history. But then once the goddess was abducted, her brothers and others went out to look for her. Where has she gone? It's a pursuit. It's an odyssey to find this Europe, and it may well be found in the refugee camps on the other shores of Europe, or dare I say in Ukraine these days. And this November, we mustn't forget, it's the 10th anniversary of Euromaidan. What did people do? They gathered in a square, their bodies in a square, they assembled and called for democratic agency over the future of their country. And so these are some of the senses in which our assembly is an enactment of our European values, values which are not exclusively European, but which throughout our history have been enacted by people who are pursuing a kind of dream, a dream of greater agency, a dream perhaps of equality for many of them. And this insurgent spirit is also something we're wanting to mobilize through the assembly. To link with what Jamie was saying, Europe also means going beyond the nation state. And the new frontier of democracy is precisely going beyond our national democracies. If Europe's to become a kind of dream again, not only for those people who are on the front lines in Ukraine or in the south of the Mediterranean, or dare I say, somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean, losing their dreams, it has to be also a dream of us of extending our democratic agency beyond our local context, our national context, to a continent-wide context. So European and transnational go together, as they also go together with transscalar. The last thing I want to say is it's not just about the European institutions, it's not just about the Commission, it's about our cities, it's about our localities and how they work together translocally across Europe. And the Assembly will be engaging with mayors, with local authorities, with regional authorities as well, because we believe that 21st century democracy has to be transscalar as well as transnational and above all inclusive.
Well, thank you, Niccolò. And I just want to, I can't resist stressing the fact that we are ambivalent and perhaps even schizophrenic about something that keeps on being repeated at the Athens Democracy Forum and everywhere. Athens, ancient Greece, the birth of democracy. Now here we are in the 21st century with our irony, with our distance, with a lot of realities that have nothing to do with the damn guys who were doing it, 2,300 years ago. First of all, we have the technology, we have the scale, the transcale, all of that. There were just one city. Above all, of course, we all know they were exclusionary. Women, slaves, foreigners were not taking part in this wonderful Athenian democracy. So as we go along, and as we call our project the Democratic Odyssey, as we show pictures of us meeting with the backdrop of the Parthenon in the Pnika, we want to retain this modern irony, this modern distance, all the time while being inspired by the ancient Greeks and what they did in combining direct democracy, sortition democracy, elective democracy. They were creative, these guys, but they had limits. And indeed, the Princess Europa actually came from Lebanon, from what we understand. As Niccolò was reminding us, Europe is made of its others. And indeed, perhaps Europa was our first refugee in chief. So it is with all this distance and irony that then we have the actual institutional conversation and ask collectively, well, what does our beacon, what we're trying to campaign for, a permanent citizen assembly for Europe, for the European Union and beyond. What do we mean, Camille, by this word permanent?
Yes, thank you very much, Kalypso, for that. It's true that you don't see it in the title now. I'm looking at our website, But if you will scroll down the page, you will see that the word permanent comes quite often. And the first question we get usually is, what do you actually mean by permanence? And I have to be honest with you, I think we still need to work a little bit more on that one because it's not an easy one. But there are three things we are pretty sure about when it comes to what we mean by permanence. And the first one is, as obvious as it seems, good to remind always, it's not the citizens who are permanent, it is the assembly that is permanent. And why is that? The first reason is that we know that citizen assemblies have a tremendous effect on the people who get involved in it. We can discuss the impact, but at the micro level, for the individuals who are engaged, it is quite transformative, really. And we don't have the time to delve into that, but we also know that Europe is pretty big, and statistically, your chance of getting picked up, to being called on your phone, you have been randomly selected to participate in an assembly, are statistically quite low. And that is a chance that you want to offer to as many people as you can. So it is important to really amplify the individual experience of taking part in such a transformative experience. The second reason is that we shouldn't be naive. Okay, we are dreamers, but citizens are also, just like us, they are humans. And usually when you keep the same people too long in the same room, you might have power dynamics. And we see that in parliament, and we see that in politics and in representative institutions, and that's very fine. But that's not what we are trying to achieve with deliberative democracy and with citizen assemblies. We have seen that, for example, and we speak out of experience here in the climate convention in Paris, in France. Once you have people who meet regularly every weekend for more than 6 months, and they understand that, wow, I'm going to speak to President Macron, of course, the natural leaders among us will, tend to take over a little bit, and you will have personal also ambition that will come in the way, and that's also very fine, but you need to manage that. So it's the institution that is permanent and not the citizen. So that's the first thing we are sure of. The second thing we are sure of when we talk about permanence is complementarity with what's actually our political institutions. And by that I mean representative institutions. We always need to remind ourselves that we are not here to, replace the European Parliament or, the European Commission or any kind of institution by a citizen assembly. They all have a different form of legitimacy, and the idea here is really to take one and the other and strengthen each other by multiplying the forms of citizen participation, because that's what democracy actually deserves. It doesn't deserve more central citizen participation channel for one authority, but certainly just deserve a multitude of forms of participation at different scales. And I think, Niccolò, you mentioned that brilliantly. It touches upon this idea of translocality. And here there's already a lot going on. We see a lot of assemblies being established at the municipal level, in cities in Italy, in regions in Brussels, and now even the European citizens with the European Commission. Let's give to Caesar what goes back to Caesar. I think that the European citizens panels, so this randomly selected 150 citizens that are being called by the European Commission to create legislative proposals, they are a source of inspiration from us. And I think Ingrid is in the room, so if you want to know more, Ingrid, perhaps if you're there, you can raise your hand. She's there. So Ingrid is working a lot on this, so if you want to know more, go to her. She's doing a fantastic job, and the purpose of this project is really basically to help Ingrid and to help the Brussels Assembly and to help all of these translocal assemblies who are sometimes still suffering from having this limited amount of citizens who have been lucky enough to be selected and the rest who do not know what's happening. So it's bridging this mini public, as we call them, with the rest of us. And here I think it's really important to mention the role of civil society and of all the actors here, and that is what the project, the Democratic Odyssey, is all about, and that's what Jamie was saying, this coalition of this multi-stakeholder coalition, that is really what this project is about. So complementing different of democracy with different skills, and hopefully making that journey together. So that's the second point, complementarity. And then the third point, in French, we would say banalisation. I think in English, perhaps we would say mainstreaming. And I picked that word voluntarily because I don't want to say the I word, which is institutionalization. Because I don't know about you, but when I think about institutionalization, I think about a building in Brussels next to the European Commission, next to Ingrid's office. And that's not really the idea here. We are really talking about just building a new social institution in a way. We want people, when they get their phone, you have been randomly selected, we don't want them to hang up thinking this is a joke. We want them to think this has actually happened and this is completely normal. So it just needs to enter in our democratic practices. We don't want journalists to come to us and ask, but who are these people? What is sortition? How does that work? We want this to become so normal that we can directly talk about politics and the issue and no longer about the process. So that's what I mean by mainstreaming. And that's also the point of this project. It's creating this bridge to work towards that collective aim and perhaps also move from one-off project where every time we need to reconvince people, re-explain what is the process, and capitalized on the shared memory, shared across actors to directly talk about politics and the real issue.
Well, thank you to the three of you. And let me say that I hope you heard enough food for thought to actually enter mini conversations among yourselves. So while we hear now for a few minutes the reaction of the youth hack, I'd like to ask the team to distribute yourself around tables because we won't have time to hear all your conversations. What we would like to suggest is that you exchange on what you think about this project, how you might want to be involved. And indeed, how, on one hand, what we may think about the beacon itself, the idea of a permanent, a standing body, a kind of fourth branch of government in Europe, and yes, that's the beacon, but also, and separately from this, the fact that we are trying to do a prototype, a pilot assembly, that is supported by a flotilla that is you, that is all of the friends of the process. That is an overall journey, and we would like to hear your opinion about this journey. Before that, we would love to hear a reaction from our youth hack.
Hi again. My name is Ssenyange. I'm from Uganda, and I'm a student at International Christian University. Together with Kara, we will present the Youth Hack on the Citizens' Assembly. So, the Youth Assembly promises to be a powerful tool or instrument in bringing the EU closer to its citizens or vice versa. I firmly believe that with the citizens' trust, the Citizens' Assembly can actually be an integral proxy of citizen participation in the EU. However, we need to confront a pressing challenge, the challenge of making sure we reach every corner of the EU's citizenry. I regret to acknowledge that certain citizens remain disengaged from the political and civil activities, fueled by the distrust in the system or other valid concerns. How, if I may ask, does the Citizens' Assembly intend to effectively engage those who remain skeptical or disengaged if it is initially launched from an EU-wide stage, especially given the tight time limit of just 1 year until its launch, because it's going to be launched in September 2024. My suggestion is straightforward. Let us consider a phased approach, beginning with a smaller national scale before ascending to the larger EU scale. And here's why. The first one, commencing at a smaller national level will foster awareness and trust among EU citizens. As the assembly unfolds closer to the home, it becomes tangible and relatable. Citizens will have the opportunity to familiarize themselves with its purpose and significance and feel the need to take part in the lottery. It is this proximity that they will see themselves reflected in its composition and find meaning in the mission. Second, building awareness and understanding is not a one-time endeavor. It requires sustained effort and dedication. Unlike the EU-wide approach, where sustaining awareness would necessitate the establishment of new strategies, starting small ensures ongoing engagement through the closer to people channels already created. Third, starting small allows for gradual learning and fine-tuning. Innovation inevitably brings unforeseen challenges. But starting small allows for the correction of insufficiencies, adjustment to evolving circumstances, and overcoming unexpected hurdles more easily and less time-consuming. In a nutshell, I am emphasizing the need to ensure that the lottery attracts all corners of the EU citizenry. This can only be done by making people relate to the assembly and indeed feel its value for them. Starting closer to the people and sustaining this closeness through the smaller scale strategy proves more effective. I rest my case. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I am Cara Anderson. I am here representing Albion College in Michigan, the United States. It should be noted that at whatever scale the Citizens' Assembly is implemented, there are some inherent flaws in the sortition process that should be addressed. While it is designed to produce an assembly that is truly representative of the population, it has the potential for bias. For one, not everyone invited to be a part of the assembly will be able to accept, even if they want to. In particular, there are many people who work long hours to provide the bare minimum for themselves and their families. Someone who cannot afford to take time off work may be unable to actively participate. Yet without the participation of these individuals, the assembly would not be a true representation of the general citizen body. Therefore, action should be taken to ensure that these citizens can still participate if extended the invitation. One possibility is to provide assembly members a stipend for their service. Yet even then, when the assembly term has ended, they may be unable to return to their previous employment, causing further economic insecurity. Another way to address this problem is for assembly duties to be very flexible around work schedules. This will also be easier to manage on a national rather than international scale. Another bias to consider is selection bias. Even though invitations are random and sortition takes place afterwards, everyone who is a part of this process chooses to accept their invitation. It is probable that certain demographic groups are more likely to accept an invitation than others. This may be due to work, as already discussed, or other factors, such as interest and how one understands themselves as a political actor. In response, sortition should also consider additional factors, such as interests and occupation when looking at representativeness. But more so, in order for sortition to be effective, a diverse group of people must first accept the invitation. One solution to increase the numbers and diversity of those accepting the invitation is to ensure that the assembly is strategically advertised as being for all citizens. Everyone must feel that they have a place in the assembly and that they are being properly represented. This will increase public support and trust in the institution, which in turn will increase the assembly's legitimacy and its ability to have its recommendations passed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you, and I'm sure you're speaking in the name of your friends and colleagues. And it's so exciting to hear how much you got into the whole spirit of the thing and constructively providing feedback. Indeed, we would like to issue instantaneously an invitation to you and to everyone else to be part of our constituent network, like in the French Revolution, Assemblée Constituante. This time it's a network. And these fundamental questions that you have raised, starting small, sortition fair, are critical. We don't have the answer. We are inviting all of us to be part of a crowdsourced, collectively thought through process. So these ideas should be part of the conversation, and they're indeed ideas we have struggled with. How do you do a pedagogy of lottery and sortition to a public that is not used to it? How do you start small with the 24 languages that we have in Europe today? All of these are fundamental questions. What we would like to ask all of the tables now to do is for a few minutes, discuss perhaps a comment or one question or one comment that you may have for us within a few minutes. So the floor is yours together. Okay.
I think Kalypso.
Yeah. Sorry, this was just a pre-taste. It's very rude to interrupt your very intense conversations. But we would like to hear a few of you just get up and share either a comment or a question from your table. So anybody who wants to get up and share a comment or a question about our democratic odyssey and the assembly. Anyone? This is all about writing yourself in the story. So please, write yourselves in our stories. We want to hear you. Comments? Questions? Just can't
You
see.
put your hand back up.
Yes, please, please speak up.
Young lady with the mask.
Yes? Okay. Yes? Please go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Betsela Dejani from John Cabot University in Rome, and here in our table we were discussing the issue of migration. So this is more of a comment, but it's very important, I think, to have a conversation of migration because there's an aspect of shared responsibility that we all need to talk about. There are some countries that have to share the burden more than others when it comes to migration, and because we don't all agree, or some have, let's say, some disagree because they share the burden more, we avoid these discussions because it creates some sort of conflict. But I think in spaces like this, we can encourage discussion, and we can encourage people to share their opinion and share their fears, their worries about these issues, and why maybe an Italian taxpayer might have some reservations on migration policies versus a Norwegian who maybe will deal with it less. And I don't know, just to push for those discussions, I guess, is something that we talked about.
Well, thank you very much. And yesterday at the PNICA, the migration and indeed even climate refugees were very much a topic that people cared about. And it's a very controversial topic. So probably our assembly will discuss it. Thank you, along the lines that you shared. This table, please, in front.
We're a table largely of Americans, the Climate Democracy Initiative. And my comment was, this happens at the local level in America much more easily than it could happen at a national or a transnational level. Mayors have councils, have citizen committees. Governors have citizen committees. Prosecutors even have citizens committees to divide them about criminal justice policy. But the national politics in the United States do not lend themselves to citizens committees that would be heard and I think even respected. And there are just many very divisive issues that divide along political lines. There's an urban-rural divide. There are race divides. And because of all that, it makes it such a much more difficult thing for the United States to try and conceive of a way to have a citizens committee that would be respected and I think, in a sense, honored for their service, that it'd be almost impossible to try and do this.
Maybe your remark is even more terrible for us because here we are on this continent, 24 languages, at least you have only one. But indeed, I think that part of our story has to do with how do you scale up? And how do you scale up in a context of huge social cleavages? In Europe or in the US, there is a transatlantic conversation, there is a global conversation about Latin America and Africa. Things are happening at a local level with citizens' engagement. How do we scale it up across very, very different contexts? So this is another of the challenge we will discuss in the Constituent Network. Do we have another table? Sorry, we just want to take a different table. Maybe there is one there in the back, and probably because the clock is ticking and we are already 2 minutes over, this will be our last comment.
Hello, my name is George, and we briefly addressed the disruption that this would cause. But also a question that came in mind was, how would we be able to incentivize individuals in order to reach to a common consensus by the end of the action?
Absolutely. Another challenge of our process, because we want those assemblies to be meaningful, to be heard, to have an impact on policy and politics and regulation, etc. So how to tell them that they will be taken seriously? And that's part of the challenge. Note that we don't answer the questions. We are a journey. We are an inclusive journey. And we will continue the conversation over the next 2 days and indeed weeks and months and years to come. And now I give the last word to Jamie.
Thank you, Kalypso. I'll stand next to you. One of the things I wanted to end on as we're standing here is, of course, we have our name, the Democratic Odyssey. This assembly is not planned to be taking place in the 4th century BC, neither in the 19th century. This is 21st century transnational People's Assembly that we're attempting to build a process towards. A key part of that is responding to our friend from the Youth Hack who put forward this idea of connectivity and identity and the space with which you feel comfortable engaging. Key to this project is the development of a European digital public sphere. This is a key dimension where we'll be continuing this conversation beyond this room. So on a totally concrete note, if you're interested in this project, you'd like to contribute directly with many of the comments that we've heard so far, please follow our Twitter and X accounts, which went live yesterday, and our Instagram page. There are email contacts there, the new website, and we'll stay in touch and keep the conversation going. Thank you.